Hi everybody, it's Armin. Today I'm going to be doing a retiming job on this NC Miata here. Another shop built this, and then they used a cheap crank pulley, as well as they didn't put the crank pulley on in the right position. So when we dynoed the car, we noticed that it made awfully low torque values. And then we went into the doing diagnostics, and we had just installed the intake and the exhaust, so we knew at least those were sealed up and good to go. The tune had just recently been redone, and so we went into checking mechanical timing. First thing I always do is I check and make sure the crank pulley is lined up with the crank sensor correctly, and it wasn't, nor could I get it close enough because they were so far apart that the sweep of the crank sensor could not move to that position. Also, because that's in the wrong position, that leads me to believe, or leads me to question if the rest of the timing is correct. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking apart all of this stuff, and then we're going to be just retiming it. I'll first be verifying how off the timing is, if any of the other components are off, or if it's just the crank pulley, and then we'll be retiming it as appropriate. We'll also be putting on a new crank pulley, OEM. The ones that are on here are known for failing because they are non-OEM, and so we're going to put on one that's OEM because those aren't known for failing. Okay, let's get to tearing it apart. All right, we've gotten to a point where we can now check the timing. I've gotten all the stuff apart, except for the front cover, obviously, and the crank pulley, so all the timing stuff is still intact. So we've got our cam holder tool here, and we have our crank tool. I need to pull the plug out of the side of the block, and then we're going to rotate this thing and see just how off the timing is. Let's see where we are right now. Okay, so I've got the cam tool in. The cam tool required a little bit. I'm pretty lenient about this just because when you torque one and torque the other, there might be a little bit of variance. It's not a huge deal. So I had to move this cam just a little bit to get that side in, but this side was in fine. Just as I'm looking at it right now, I'm not sure if the crank pulley is even in the right spot, but we also need to check the crank by itself because I can't check it while I have the cam tool in. I have to move the crank over until it hits it and then see if the cam tool goes in. So let's see, I need the mirror. Let's get my mirror. So first we're going to see if the crank gear lines up with the correct spot. And all I'm doing is I'm visually confirming whether the holes line up between the crank and the front cover. It might be off by like 2 degrees, if that. They're not perfectly lined up, but 2 degrees, I mean, it's really not that big of a deal. But when you're trying to line up the timing tool, I mean, or well, let's see how the crank comes out. So I'm going to knock the tool back out here. Okay. So to do this, I'm going to back the crank off just a touch as well. Actually, I think I was able to bottom the tool out, so let's see. Nope, it's touching the crank. It's got to be touching the crank. Let's back it up just a little bit. Okay, just thread anymore. Well, that's not good. I got another about 3 threads out of this thing after I backed the crank. So let's tighten it forward. Okay. We're touching. So with the crank in the correct position, now let's also check and see how far it's off. So if the cam's in the correct position, we were off by, let's say, 2 degrees. With the crank in position, now we're off, I think, 3 degrees in the opposite direction. Well, that's curious. So now if that should be, if I try to put the cam tool in, that we won't be anywhere close. So let's see. Now the cam tool here. I'm gonna wiggle this in. I got this one in. Oh man, nope, it's not going in. So it would appear as though maybe our exhaust cam is off a bit, as well as our crank pulley's off a bit. So that justifies retiming it. So, well, also that crap crank pulley that's on here justifies retiming it. So we're also going to pull this off and then to see if maybe the crank pulley itself is not lining up, because if maybe the trigger wheel got like slipped or something. I just pulled this one bolt out and it's got like blue crap on it. The heck was this bolt from? Is it someone using blue RTV? So I got like black RTV and blue, so I don't know. Some of the other ones look to have it as well, so I wonder if this thing was just smeared with RTV when it was assembled. Yikes. Okay, so we got out our no-name brand crank pulley. Looks like it was contacting the front cover right here. There's a bit of a scratch mark, and this apparently is a serrated crank, so we will not need to use our our crank washers. All right, and then we can look on the front here. This is supposedly was brand new when it was installed on the car. It may be new old stock because this rubber is cracking all the way around. I've replaced a couple of these for various failure reasons. One of them it shattered in the middle, another one the trigger wheel shattered. Let's compare this to the OEM. Okay, brand new in bag, OEM. Check it out. It's got a sticker on the back that says LF94, and on the front it says LF94 also. You also notice that this one, now let's bring the camera down a bit. Let me put this in a better position to see. One moment. So if we look at this one, nice, shiny. You can see all the edges are pretty refined and all that. And then the rubber ring is actually inside. It's actually inset here. And then we look at this off-brand one, and you can see the rubber ring sticks out a bit. It doesn't have any of the balancing holes in the front. Actually, we don't even know if this thing's balanced. And then we look at the back side, and you can see the difference between the trigger wheels is it's a bit different. And then just the general quality of the casting is vastly different. This one, much more precise. Everything is more shallow than the machine spot here. This thing, it's actually sticking up on all these ribs, are sticking out, and then it looks like they've been cut down right here as well. The OEM one doesn't have any of those cuts because it's just, I don't know, made right? Is that what we're trying to get here? Now, as far as positioning, it's going to be hard to measure if one is much off of the other one. Oh no, definitely they're different, because I can tell right off the bat. You know what? I recently bought a compass. Let's go get that. Sorry, I recently brought a fancy protractor, not a compass. I've had protractors, I've had compasses, but this one's a little different. So this one allows me to measure a little better in certain aspects. So I can do this number. It's pretty cool. Okay, so what I'm noticing is right off the bat, when you line this one up, it looks like if I visually line this up on the crank gear, let's see, visually lining it up, I got one eyeball on this thing. We're almost in the center of this tooth, almost. A little bit to one side, so I'm a little bit, maybe like 1 degree-ish off. So actually we can figure out how far off. Let me get my eyeball centered up, and then we just slide this over. that far off. Yeah, that's 1 degree, so it is 1 degree off. Okay, can we agree on that? Is that visible? Is that visible? Let's see. Looks about right, yeah? Okay, let's grab the off-brand one. Let's set this guy on here. I'm gonna line it up with the hole, same way. Oh, dude. There's not even a tooth in sight. There's not even a tooth in sight on this thing. So the trigger wheel is not even centered on it. How about that? Cool, good job. Don't use off-brand, use OEM. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take a lunch break here, and then we'll continue with disassembly, and then we'll reassemble and time it again. Okay, I actually went and stepped into the office to do this under a little better lighting. This one is off by 5 degrees. This one is actually off by 0 degrees from that 5th tooth. So I marked both of them, the 5th tooth there. When you line it up under better lighting, this is dead on, so I'm guessing that's how they align them. And then this one is 5 degrees off. Now that would be, I think that's in the retarded direction. Either way, so we're going to put on an OEM, and the timing will be set correctly. We'll also be fixing the cams, since those aren't correctly in time either. Okay, lunch is over. I'm going to continue disassembling the front end here. Just got to get the bolts across the front bottom of the timing cover, and then we should be able to pop it off. Also, a fun thing I noticed just a moment ago here is that this thermostat actually is still the junkyard thermostat. Sometimes when you buy these motors, they'll still come with the thermostat on there, and the reason I know this is because the OEM NC thermostat is, as you've probably seen, it's a long neck, and the one that's on here is the short neck. I'll show you. Check that guy out. This is actually supposed to be, another, 1.5 inches longer. Also, good job using a worm gear there and just destroying that hose, huh? Gracious. Well, at least all the installation stuff we've done has been done to at least a little bit of a higher standard than that. So, let's go ahead and continue the disassembly. So it looks like the previous person, this motor has been assembled a couple of times because there's blue RTV on here and there's black RTV on here. And the black RTV was just sort of stuck over the blue RTV, it looks like, because we got still blue RTV in a lot of spots. Well, either way, after I'm finished, there won't be any blue nor black RTV, it's all gray RTV. So we'll put this aside and we'll clean that up in a bit. I'm going to go ahead and take care of removing all the timing components now. So as you've probably seen in my other videos, this is just going to be a little more difficult than doing it outside of the car, just because a little bit less of access, but we can still take care of it. Okay, I've got my timing pin in there. I do not have my cam holder in there, and that's fine. We're just going to go ahead and break loose those cams now. Okay, I've just pulled off the VBT gear, and I'd like to point out that there is sludge inside of this. How is there sludge inside of this? Also, there's sludge all over the face. Look at this, look at this. I'm wiping it off. It's just changing color. You can see there's a bunch of black on the inside. There's a bunch of black on the face. I don't know. how this happened, unless this came out of a dirty motor. I can't really blame the builder for this. I can blame the builder for a lot of other stuff, but I can't blame them for this one, because this also could be the lack of maintenance by the customer, and they didn't have an oil cooler and they were racing it. So this could actually just be sludge from needing to change the oil more often, you know, due to breakdown. But there's a thing I can blame the builder for, and that is the face of this is scarred up pretty badly. How do you even manage to scar up the face of it like that? I mean, you see these marks here. But either way, I'll clean this thing up and we'll go back together. There was no problem with the VVT, so I'm not just going to willy-nilly replace out the gears just because they're ugly. Okay, looks like I've gotten the whole front cover area, the mating surface all cleaned up. I'll show you. Got in there and I did a lot of it with the scraping tool, and then I went back and did the rest of it with a just regular old Scotch-Brite. So now I need to air gun the front off, so get rid of all that dust. Give it a wipe down with isopropyl. And we need to verify that all the timing components are in the correct position. Well, the cams are. I'll triple verify that that crank position is. Let's see, we can take a look right now. We can just stick the camera down there. We should be able to see it. Yeah? And I can't see it, but maybe the camera can. No, it's probably on. Let's verify. We just stick our hand down in here and push on that counterweight. There we go. All right, well, hopefully you saw it, because I can't even see the screen on the back of the camera when I do that. Okay, well, I'm going to cut the camera for a little bit. I'm going to go clean that front cover off. I am replacing out the front main seal. I'll do that on camera though. Okay, I finished with all of the cleanup stuff. The front of the motor I sprayed down with brake clean after I'd gone over it with the Scotch-Brite. And the way I do this to avoid getting all of that nasty stuff into the engine is I stuff a bunch of towels in the front end, so that way all the brake clean settles there, as well as those dust and other particles. So that way I pull it out, it comes all with it. Next thing is I went over the front cover. The front cover now no longer has RTV all over it. There's no blue. There is a little blue spot there. I don't know what that is. It looks like ink. But all the blue RTV is gone. All the black RTV is gone. And there also was some gray RTV, which is the OEM. But I got rid of all that. Also, you'll notice that there is a very, very poorly done cut here for the belt. And I noticed that there was evidence of the belt dragging across it. So I have decided I'm going to go ahead and clean that guy up. I'm going to just go through and smooth it and then cut a little bit tighter into the corner. I also went with all of the timing components and I sprayed them down with brake clean, wiped all of them down by hand, so when they go back together we don't have any risk of anything slipping. So I'm going to go ahead and off camera just clean that cut up, and then we'll go back on camera and reassemble everything. My round edges, so I took my specific aluminum sanding disc on my spinny gun here, and I rounded off the edge of that so it looks a lot nicer. There's a little more clearance than before. and the edges are now round. Just minor attention to detail stuff. So let's knock this front main seal out of here and put the new one in. Alright, at this point, we're going to wait for the RTB to dry until tomorrow, and then we're going to put on the crank pulley and reassemble everything else. If you haven't seen my other videos, the reason I do this is because the bottom 4 bolts are very difficult to get to with the crank pulley on, so I'll just go ahead and wait for everything to dry, tighten them all up, then I'll put the crank pulley on. So it'll just make life a little bit easier. Alright, so that's all for today. Okay, looks like I didn't need to wait 24 hours. Looks like this RTV is already dry. I touched it around a couple of the edges and there's nothing coming off. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep on assembling. Let's get this thing back together today. Okay, the timing has now been set. I do need to do my yield pass on the crank pulley, but I just pulled out the key on the front that was lining up the crank pulley. I'm pulling out the timing key on the side. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the spark plug, spin this motor over twice. We're gonna verify that it's good. All the front bolts have been tightened up. That's all that, so let's rotate it over. Oh, one more thing. I'm going to go ahead and install the crank sensor right now because the crank sensor should be in the correct position. Alright, because this was part of the problem of why it came in, I'm going to show you while we're on camera. So with the camera here, let's go ahead and get down in here and show you the 5th crank tooth needs to line up right on the center. And if you zoom in, you can see that. It's painted white on the OEM. But before we couldn't do that because the crank pulley was that far off and the timing was incorrect. So combined, it was running very retarded. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and spin this motor over, verify our timing before we lock the crank down. Okay, so what I've done is I've rotated it over. Right before I got the TDC, I stuck the pin in there, I slammed up against the pin, and I went to see if the timing piece went in the back, which it did, and now I'm going to get my mirror again, and I'm going to verify that everything is still lined up at the bottom. We're going to put my mirror. Alright, if anyone ever checks me on this car, I don't know what happened, but I think the paint pen kind of squirted when it was down there, because apparently there's just red all over the place. But I got my marks lined up, so let me show you. Let's get a light in there. There we go. So the mark I always do on the corners, like on one of the vertices. So it's that vertex is supposed to line up with that dot, and well, it looks like a lot of red dots made it around. Well, either way, the timing is now set. Time to just do a full reassemble. Well, it actually looks like I've finished here. Obviously I need to put the hood on and the tower brace, but I'll do that tomorrow. The tower brace is really hard to put on without the car on the ground, and the hood is hard to put on without the car on the ground also. So I'll just take care of those things together tomorrow. It's an hour after closing, so I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. But thank you for watching. I hope this video helps. I hope that none of you also fall victim to this problem. So give me a shout if I can help you out. Have a nice day.